Hello everyone. Welcome to my channel, Echo of Life. Let's start. Have you ever met someone who seems to move through the world almost unseen? They aren't loud. They aren't disruptive. They don't demand space. Instead, they soften their presence. They're careful not to become a burden. They observe the room more than they occupy it. And if you look closely, you might notice it. The quiet ache in their gaze, the pause before they speak, as though they've already decided their words won't land. These are often the grown versions of children who were emotionally overlooked. And the truth is, their solitude didn't begin recently. It began long ago in the very place that was meant to feel safest, home. When we imagine neglect, we often think of something visible, a child without food, without shelter. But emotional absence is subtler, and in many ways more hidden. It doesn't leave marks on the skin. It leaves them on the spirit. And because it's so quiet, so ordinary, many who grow up this way don't even recognize what's missing. They just sense that something feels unanchored. They recall that while other children express themselves freely, laughing, crying, speaking without hesitation, they learn to hold everything inside. They learned early that their emotions were either too large or not enough. And so they built a survival strategy,
Need a hand
stillness.
with that? No,
Developmental
I'm good.
psychology helps us understand the weight of this silence. Experts in childhood emotional development point out that children don't require perfect caregivers. They don't need every feeling mirrored perfectly. What they need is to feel noticed, comforted, and understood most of the time. When that doesn't happen, when caregivers are preoccupied, overwhelmed, or emotionally distant, the child begins to feel transparent. And transparency, carried year after year, becomes one of the heaviest loads a person can bear. What makes this especially difficult is that unlike trauma caused by active harm, emotional neglect is defined by what didn't occur. There's no single event to point to. Instead, it's built from countless quiet moments. A child saying, "I'm scared," and no one soothing them, crying without anyone asking why, feeling excitement with no one to share it with. Slowly, they stop reaching out. Slowly, they learn their inner world isn't welcome. And as adults, they continue this pattern, often without realizing it. Consider how this appears later in life. The emotionally overlooked child becomes the adult who feels disconnected in relationships, even when surrounded by people.
You're fine.
They may
Don't
seem
cry.
self-sufficient, capable, even resilient. But beneath that exterior lingers a quiet question. Do I truly matter to anyone? And because they never learned to trust their emotions, they often struggle to understand themselves. They second-guess their instincts. They mute their needs. They strive endlessly to prove their worth, yet carry a hollow space inside that no accomplishment can fill. Loneliness, in this sense, isn't just about being alone. It's about being unknown. Research tells us that long-term loneliness can impact health as severely as smoking daily. It raises the risk of low mood, anxiety, and even physical conditions. And so often, when we trace the origins of this loneliness, we find the same beginning. A child who learned their feelings didn't count. It's important to pause here and acknowledge. Most caregivers who unintentionally create emotional distance aren't cruel. Many were emotionally overlooked themselves. They love their children. They provide. They want what's best. But love without attunement can still leave marks. A parent might say, "You're fine, don't cry," thinking it builds toughness, when in reality it teaches a child to question their own pain. A parent might respond to excitement with "calm down. It's not that special,"
Your
believing they're
feelings
offering perspective,
matter.
when really they're saying, "Your joy is too much." Over time, these quiet messages gather. The child learns not to trust their inner world. What's striking is how adaptable children are. To cope, they develop roles. Some become the achiever, always excelling, always perfect, trying to earn the attention they crave. Others become the unseen, withdrawing, staying quiet, trying not to take up space. Some act out, not because they want trouble, but because negative attention can feel better than no attention at all. Each of these roles hides the same truth, a deep hunger to be seen and valued. As adults, these roles don't simply vanish. The achiever continues to overwork, burning out while secretly feeling unworthy. The unseen avoids vulnerability and risk, believing somewhere inside they don't deserve more. The one who acts out may push people away before being left. All are rooted in the same early fear of abandonment. On the surface, these lives may look different. Underneath, they share the same thread, the loneliness of never having their inner world acknowledged. One of the deepest sorrows of emotional neglect is how it distorts self-perception. Because the absence is invisible, children often conclude, "It must be me. Something is wrong with me." Instead of recognizing my needs weren't met, they internalize I shouldn't have needs at all. And this belief can linger for decades, leading to fragile self-worth, difficulty trusting others, and a quiet emptiness that's hard to put into words. It's not exactly sadness. It's not quite anger. It's more like a quiet, steady absence. Like a house where all the furniture is missing. You can walk through the rooms, but nothing feels lived in. Yet despite all this, another truth exists. Healing is possible. And it often starts with naming what happened. For many who were emotionally overlooked, the first step is simply realizing they are not broken, and they are not alone. That the emptiness they feel isn't proof of defectiveness, but a natural response to what was missing. This recognition alone can be profoundly freeing, because it shifts the story from something's wrong with me to something happened to me. Studies in brain adaptability show that our minds can rewire throughout life. Just because you were emotionally overlooked as a child doesn't mean you're destined for loneliness forever. When you begin to acknowledge your feelings, practice self-kindness, and seek relationships that nurture you, you are literally teaching your brain a new way of being. Slowly, room by room, the empty house inside can begin to fill. But the process isn't easy. When you've spent years quieting emotions, feeling them again can be overwhelming. Imagine being underwater for a long time and suddenly coming up for air. The intensity can be both frightening and freeing. Many adults who were emotionally overlooked experience this. They may cry without knowing why, feel anger they can't explain, or experience joy that feels delicate. This isn't weakness. This is the spirit relearning what it means to be alive. Perhaps the most important thing to understand is this. The loneliness of the emotionally overlooked child is not a life sentence. It is a wound, and like all wounds, it can heal with time, care, and awareness. Healing requires the opposite of what caused the wound. It requires being seen, heard, and understood. Sometimes that comes through therapy. Sometimes through safe relationships.
You're fine.
Sometimes
Don't
it
cry.
begins with the simple act of telling yourself, "My feelings matter." And here lies a paradox. The very sensitivity that made you feel invisible as a child can become a profound strength as an adult. Because you know what it's like to be unseen, you can become someone who truly sees others. Because you understand the sting of dismissal, you can offer a compassion that is rare and deep. Many of the most empathetic, intuitive, and creative people in the world were once emotionally overlooked children. Their loneliness became a kind of fertile ground from which something beautiful could still grow. Now we step into the harder, but more freeing territory. What it truly takes to heal, and what it means to reclaim a life that was never fully lived. Because here's the truth. Loneliness may be the shadow of childhood neglect, but it doesn't have to be your destiny. The fact that you're even reading this, that you're curious and reflecting, reveals something powerful. A part of you still believes in connection, still longs for wholeness, still hopes it's possible to live differently. And that spark is enough. Let's begin with the most fundamental shift, moving from self-blame to self-understanding. For many who grew up emotionally unseen, the inner voice defaults to criticism. Why can't I be normal? Why do I feel so empty? Why do I struggle in relationships? This self-reproach echoes childhood, when the child assumed they were the problem rather than realizing their needs weren't met. Healing begins when you stop asking what's wrong with me and start asking what happened to me. That question changes everything. It lifts shame and plants compassion in its place. And compassion is the soil where true growth starts. Psychologists note that emotional neglect doesn't just deprive a child of comfort. It deprives them of emotional literacy. If your feelings were dismissed or ignored, you never learned to name them, navigate them, or express them in healthy ways. That's why so many adults with this history find it hard to identify what they're feeling. One powerful practice is reflective writing. Not as a task, but as a way of giving your inner world a voice. When you sit with pen and paper and gently ask, "What am I feeling right now?" you are rebuilding a bridge to parts of yourself that were quieted. Over time, this helps you tell sadness from anger, fear from excitement. It helps you learn that feelings aren't dangerous, they're information. And once you learn to listen, they can guide you toward the life you deserve. Another key step is nurturing relationships that affirm you. For someone who grew up emotionally overlooked, this can feel risky. Trust isn't instinctive. Vulnerability feels unfamiliar. You might fear being too much or not enough. But human beings are wired for connection, and healing seldom happens alone. Even one safe relationship with a friend, partner, or therapist can begin to repair the loneliness. Studies on attachment show that secure bonds in adulthood can rewire the brain, building a sense of safety that was missing earlier. This is why it's so meaningful to seek people who listen without judgment, who honor your emotions instead of minimizing them. Because every time someone responds with care, it sends a quiet message to your nervous system. You matter. You are not invisible anymore. But what if those safe connections feel hard to find? What if your family doesn't understand, or your social circle isn't supportive? This is where another form of healing enters. Reparenting yourself. It may sound abstract, but it's quite practical.
Need a hand with that?
Becoming
No,
the
I'm
attentive
good.
caregiver to yourself that you needed long ago. When you feel sad, instead of dismissing it the way others might have, you pause and offer comfort. When you feel joy, you allow yourself to fully feel it instead of dimming it. When you feel afraid, you acknowledge it gently instead of shaming yourself. Over time, these small acts of inner care add up. They teach you that your emotions are valid, your needs are real, and you are worthy of kindness. Of course, healing isn't a straight line. Some days you'll feel grounded and connected. Other days you might slip back into old patterns of shutting down or withdrawing. That's normal. You are undoing years, sometimes
Something is
decades
wrong.
of conditioning. What matters isn't perfection, but persistence. Each time you choose to feel instead of numb, each time you reach out instead of retreat, each time you validate yourself instead of criticize, you are rewiring your inner world. It's also important to include the body in this process. Emotional neglect doesn't only live in the mind, it lives in the body. Children who learn to suppress emotions often tighten their muscles, hold their breath, or make themselves small to stay unnoticed. As adults, this can show up as lasting tension,
You're fine, don't cry.
shallow breathing, or even physical stress. Practices like gentle movement, mindful breathing, or simple stretching can help release this stored holding. By reconnecting with your body, you reconnect with parts of yourself that were long set aside. And that physical grounding can offer a sense of safety that words alone sometimes cannot. Let's return to the theme of loneliness. For the emotionally overlooked child, loneliness became normal. They grew up believing disconnection was simply how life is. But loneliness isn't destiny. It's a signal. It's your spirit's way of saying, I was meant for more than this. I was meant to be known. When you reframe loneliness this way, it becomes less of a burden and more of a compass, pointing you back toward connection. And here's the paradox. Sometimes the first step out of loneliness is learning to be fully present with yourself. Because when you can sit with your own emotions without shame or fear, you stop being a stranger to yourself. And once you're no longer a stranger to yourself, you become more open to genuine connection with others. Let's also recognize that emotional neglect is not uncommon. Research suggests millions of adults carry its imprint, often without naming it. This means you are not alone,
Your
not even
feelings
close.
matter.
In fact, your story may be more shared than you know. And this shared experience brings a hidden gift: empathy. When you begin to heal, when you begin to understand your own loneliness, you also begin to recognize it in others. You become the person who notices when someone feels unseen. You become the voice that says, I understand. And in a world where so many are quietly carrying their own absence, that empathy is a profound form of grace. Ultimately, the lonely journey of the emotionally overlooked child can transform into something else: a life of conscious connection. Not the shallow connection of distraction or small talk, but the deep connection that comes when you're willing to be seen as you are and to see others as they are. This is the path from invisibility to presence, from silence to voice, from emptiness to meaning, but it begins with a choice. The choice to stop blaming yourself, the choice to start listening inward, the choice to risk vulnerability even when it feels unfamiliar, the choice to believe you are worthy of being known. These choices, repeated day after day, slowly loosen the old patterns of neglect and replace them with something new: self-respect, self-trust, and authentic connection. And if you take nothing else from this, let it be this: the loneliness you feel is not proof that something is wrong with you. It is proof that you are human. It is proof that you were made for connection. And it is proof that even if your early years didn't provide it, you can still create it now. Healing may be slow. It may be imperfect. But every step you take toward being seen, even by yourself, is a step out of the shadows and into life. Yes, the quiet loneliness of the emotionally overlooked child is real. It is heavy. It leaves marks that can last for years. But it is not the end of the story, because you are not meant to stay invisible. You are not destined to remain unknown. You are capable of building a life where your feelings are honored, your voice is heard, and your presence is felt. And when you do, you don't just heal yourself, you help heal the world around you. Because every time one person chooses connection over silence, compassion over dismissal, presence over absence, they make it easier for others to do the same. And perhaps that's how the cycle finally breaks. Not through perfection, not by erasing the past, but through the simple, radical act of choosing to be fully alive here and now.